I decided to be an architect somewhere in high school, although I had a lot of other thoughts in mind. Being from Wyoming, everybody talks about petroleum and extraction, and maybe petroleum engineering would be a good field. And that period of time there, I thought about military academies. I thought, I'm not top of my class, maybe I'll go to the Coast Guard. So I gave that a try. And color blindness got in the way many times in my life, actually even today. But through some inspiration with some teachers that I had, I decided that architecture is where I would like to go. I didn't know much about it, actually, other than there's drawing involved, and eventually there's a building involved. And so I went to junior college one year in my hometown, Casper, Wyoming. And Mrs. Cedar, my calculus teacher, was probably a good inspiration. She helped guide me. I felt like the counselors at high school couldn't do much for architecture. Sheep ranching, agriculture, petroleum engineering, yes. Architecture, no. So after that 1 year in junior college, I had been searching around and found there was a local architect in Casper, Mr. Worley, and I had actually cut his grass. Never talked to him, only his wife. And I got accepted at the University of Utah and found out that it worked for me. When I came to school in Utah, I really hadn't even visited the school. Everything I knew about the architecture school here was from the catalogs. No internet, catalogs was about it. And you read a few names and they sound interesting. And so I really did not know what to expect. I had taken drafting classes in high school. I took all the drawing classes that I could get that were architecture or engineering related. So when I came here, basic design and using color chips and drawing, all kinds of odd things that I thought had nothing to do with architecture was really a wide awakening for me. I knew there'd be science, I knew there'd be engineering, I knew there'd be math. I didn't know much about design. So that was the eye-opener. It was also exciting. I mean, I found out there were things I was very good at. I found out there were things I wasn't very good at. But through architecture, I'm introduced to the art department. I was able to take classes there, took pottery, which I still enjoy today. And then the rest of the experience at the U, it's a tough road, architecture school. A lot of hours. I didn't have a lot of money. I had to work. Work cuts into studio time or studying time or reading time. Something suffers, or sleeping time. But it was a challenge, day in, day out, week in, week out, as it turns out, year in, year out. And but I would never change that again. I would like to have said maybe if I didn't work, I would have enjoyed school better because I could have got more into it. But I loved it, and it's a good school. In 1967, I was 10 days after I proposed to my current wife, my only wife, Carolyn, I got drafted. My great draft board in Casper, Wyoming. I still wasn't a resident here. And I had to figure out a plan to hopefully finish 2 years of school. And the ROTC program here, either Navy or Air Force or Army, would provide you an opportunity to enroll in the military, you're going in, finish 2 years of school, and then be commissioned at graduation and then serve in the military. So that also served me well. Vietnam is that was a very important topic back then. I can remember in ROTC standing formation on Thursday and marching up to the Park Building for a peace march on the next day. I'm not sure either one of those groups appreciated what I did on the other side of things, but military was looked at vastly differently at that time than today, I would say. So I was in, and I was scheduled to go to Alexandria, Fort Belvoir, and then Fort Hood in Texas. The next thing for combat engineer, which was my MOS, was Vietnam. And we had our storage unit in 2 places for the very little that we owned at the time. And my wife was going to look at me taking off for a year or so the next year. In the middle of all of that, President Nixon was cutting things back, and I did not end up having to go to Fort Hood, but did spend 9 years in the reserve. So still proud of that service, and my brother going to Vietnam is enough for our family, so we survived it. What did I do after my Army service, or active duty service? I came back through Salt Lake. We had no plans to live here. Neither one of us are from here. Carolyn from Los Angeles, and I from Casper. But we had friends here. We thought, let's take the opportunity to say hi to a few, look around a little. I'd already written letters to Colorado. I knew some architects there. Things were pretty dry in 1970. But I had done some work with Don the summer before I went in the Army, and Don Panushka offered me a job. He was busy, and I worked with Don in a very small office. There were probably at any one time no more than 5 people there, and I got a chance to work on a major job at the University of Utah, the hospital. And towards the end of that, as it was coming out of the ground, I reconnected to Abe Gillis and a friend of his, a partner at the time, Bob Brotherton. And they were looking to expand their firm. They wanted to bring somebody in. I was only interested if there was going to be ownership in the future. And that's what we all wanted. So we began talking about how to make it happen. Those two had already incorporated by that time in 1978. And I joined them in March of '79, and grew through several versions of our firm over the next couple of years. How did we become a firm and decide on the direction we wanted to go? Obviously that comes out of experience that you have. We each brought a certain amount of talent along those lines, and I have to admit, from a personal standpoint, I didn't have a long list of potential clients. I mean, I'd worked on institutional work for my previous employment, Don Panushka, and a lot of his clients were personal business and personal social friends, so I wasn't going to inherit those. So each of us brought different talent, and most of it, I would say the preponderance of it was institutional in basis. In other words, doing work for the state or other municipalities. Although we had a substantial amount of design build work that we were doing. Design build in 1979 was, to many architects, a pariah. I mean, that is not a direction an architect should go. And that depends on the client, depends on the work. And in our case, we found you could be very successful doing design build work. And you can get a lot of work done quickly and under very good circumstances, and an architect and a contractor working for a client. And none of the conflicts built into it that we see a lot of times nowadays in conventional project delivery. So I would say combining that design-build work, which led us into many industrial projects. Industrial work became, one of the primary areas of income for us. It was easy to go in and help land a project with a contractor, or on our own for that matter, with that experience, because we had a very long resume of that kind of work. We were also able to take that same kind of work and introduce ourselves to the military, the Corps of Engineers. And we were able to successfully land a number of small initially, but some very large military projects over the year. That led to doing work with the post office, led to work with the VA, led to work for the GSA. And that was one of the areas that I helped track, was federal work. Bob was more on the design-build side of things, and then he was gone. Abe had the institutional experience and good connections with the state, and we were able to grow that. And pretty soon, you're growing 2 or 3 things, and some of those lead to another. I ended up with responsibility in the marketing side of things. If you're hungry, you go after what's out there. If a wolf prefers elk, if there's no elk, he'll eat something else. And I didn't look at our clients as being like we were devouring them, but I wasn't afraid to go after any kind of work if I thought it was something that we had a shot of getting, that we had the experience that we could bring to a client. And we eventually spread that in a pretty wide spectrum of work. What do I like about this profession? What do I get the most satisfaction out of? I tell you, as a salesman, my dad was a salesman, and when I was in 8th grade, I thought that might be what I'd be. It was a salesman, because I really didn't think about being a fireman or doctor. But sure enough, I ended up being a salesman. What does a salesman like about his job? Closing the sale, getting the job. And I have to say that the adrenaline that goes into getting qualified, to competing with others, actually being awarded a job, and you and others will remember that I like to celebrate, and I'm on the table dancing, getting that job. Well, after that party's over, you sit down, and that's when the real work begins, and that's when it involves, many people in the firm to get that work done. And that element of it is incredibly rewarding to me, to work with a team of people all pointed towards a direction of satisfying the needs of a client. And oftentimes that client is a very wide, deep client, and you have to meet the needs of a lot of different people. Having a relationship with that client where they're looking to us to help them invest a whole lot of money in bricks and mortar, and having them trust us, having mutual respect, and then ultimately finishing that project and seeing this 3-dimensional piece of art that's working well for a client and that client's clients, and being able to see that every day. Take a friend and show them that that's what you did. Take your mom there and show her what her son did, or your kids. That's multiple stages of enjoyment. One of the first that I thought was really remarkable, I really was proud of, was St. Thomas More Catholic Church out in Sandy. I love that, and that was a great collaboration in our firm. David Brems was a lead designer on it, and that was a very difficult client because everybody there was from some other state, and they all knew what church architecture ought to be. But at the end of the day, it's a marvelous space. It's a great addition to that community out there. It's a wonderful space to worship in. And as a Roman Catholic, that's an important thing to me. The natural history of the museum, that was David's project. I still had a role in that, still had a role in helping to get that. If nothing else, emotional support sometimes. But to be able to take somebody to that building, even if you're rushed on time and all you do is drive up the street and see it, looking at it from the west, it's an incredible experience. I would say the most discouraging were probably on the early along when you're trying to get established. It doesn't take much to get you off track. I mean, one good project you've hired some people to do and it gets put on hold or it gets canceled. You've banked a lot on that project. You've paid rent based on having that project. And if those things fail or somebody fails to pay you, those are devastating to a small firm trying to grow. And none of us had an endowment keeping us through this. We were all hard-working, borrowing from our own houses or our own savings sometimes to make payroll. Those were hard lessons to learn, but we never gave up. We always believed in one another. We believed in our families, and we always found a way. We always found a way, and we never missed a payroll. And that is something I am incredibly proud of, and I believe all the employees that ever worked with us have appreciated that. It seems like in the earlier days, you could separate some of these things out. You had time to think, you had time to communicate, you had time to drive to the project site, you had time to sit down and design and draw. Technology increased so much, the ability to communicate on an instant. You don't even have time to think about returning a phone call. It used to be, I think you could be more thoughtful about what you did. I think you could let things absorb a bit. You might have a chance to talk to your partner about something before you made a decision. Towards the end of my working career, that was really hectic. I mean, I think it was just, it's overwhelming, and that's why it was time for younger people to take over. Well, listen to your instincts. They're not always right, but they will help lead you down the path. This is a great profession. I mean, you can really have a fulfilled life in this profession if you find your way in it. If you're serious about this building, you're serious about architecture and design, get ready to give it your all, because it will take all you've got.